Here for the second part of the Najdorf series. So in the first part, we started looking at the bishop c4, the Fischer-Sozin variation, and we were looking at the knight bd7 line, which goes as follows. And here we mostly looked at moves like f4 and e5, playing for f4, e5, f5, stuff like that, forcing lines. Here we're going to look at a different take on it, which is bishop g5. So here, I think black's best move is to play queen a5, and now queen d2. With this move, queen a5, black is threatening this bishop on g5, and he's threatening knight takes e4. So queen d2, and now b5. This is extremely important to play b5 now, because oftentimes black will want to develop his bishop to e7 first before doing anything like that. But if black has already played knight bd7, this is usually just a bad idea, because if something like bishop e7 castles queenside, if b5 now, we're going to feel this weakness of the c6 square. And this bishop on e7 is going to fall, and white will have an excellent position. So b5 castles and bishop b7. You want to do it in this move order, because otherwise knight c6 will be able to trade off your dark squared bishop, and d6 will be a big problem. So this is the key point. A lot of older games reach this position, not exactly through this move order. It was seen many times through the bishop g5 variation of the Najdorf, which goes like this. Oh, sorry, not e6. Knight bd7 is the kind of offbeat move that was often played. And then bishop c4, queen a5, queen d2, and e6. And we're going to get a very similar position, something like castle and b5, bishop b3. We're right back where we started. So if it's okay, I'll just keep this position on the board because that's what we just had. And so bishop b7, like we were looking at. So now here, black is threatening this pawn on e4. So white has a few things he can do. He can play for f3, but I personally don't like this, because I think white should be trying to push e5 or f5 through. So he'll play rook he1. Now there's some interesting moves in this position. I think bishop e7 is the best move. So now black does have a threat here. If white plays some random move, h3, let's say, black will play b4 and then follow up with knight takes e4. Sorry. Knight takes e4, and then this bishop on g5 is going to be hanging. Everything's really falling apart. So oftentimes white will want to play something like f3 here. But I think in this situation, playing f4 is okay. So after b4, white will play knight d5. So e takes d5, e takes d5. And it's hard to see what black is going to do here. White is up a piece, but in the meantime, black has very little to do. White is threatening something like knight f5 here, and it's hard to find a good move for black in this position. Like, for example, let's say king f8 to try to prevent knight f5 in such a drastic pin. White will just play a3. And if nothing else, when black tries to get himself out of this mess, white will just have two pawns, a huge bind, and a lot of compensation for his sacrificed material. None of black's pieces can really do anything here. So I think that b4 is probably not the most accurate here after this. So knight c5 is a move. And now it's very important to get the move order right in this position. So if white plays e5, after f takes e5, f takes e5, knight f e4, I think black's position is just good. Because if knight takes e4, queen takes d2 check, if bishop takes d2, knight takes e4, and at this point, black has completed his development. Soon he'll castle and put his rooks on d8 and c8. And I think that white will have some problems, especially considering black's bishop is so strong. This bishop on d2 on b3 is extremely passive, and white's bishop on d2 is probably just going to get traded off for black's knight. And I think black can approach the future with confidence. And likewise, if knight takes d2 here, bishop takes g5, and the tactics all work out for black, and I think the endgame will just be better. However, in this position, white can play bishop takes f6, and this was thought for a long time to be a great way for white to play this position, because after bishop takes f6, f takes e5, bishop e7, it looks like this is great for black. If black has one move, he castles. And then he's safe. He'll play rook d8, rook c8. He'll have an excellent game with the two bishops. White's king will be under a lot of pressure, and black will be safe. However, he does need one move to do that. And in the meantime, white has this nice move, bishop takes e6. So if f takes e6, knight takes e6, white cannot castle. It's going to be illegal. And if white takes this knight off, black will give a check. Or sorry, if black takes the knight off on e6, white will give this check on d7, and this position is just going to become a disaster very quickly. It's looking like white's going to get checkmated. Or sorry, black's going to get checkmated. So black can't exactly take that off, and if he castles himself, just ignoring it, this would be an interesting pawn sacrifice. Unfortunately, white can just play bishop d5, and I think that or maybe actually bishop b3 might be even better. And with this pawn on e6 gone, white will very quickly find excellent posts for his knights that were not there before. And I think at this point, white probably has a pretty big advantage. So there's actually a very fritzy move here. Or a computer type move that black can play is considered the most accurate, and that's queen d8. It's counter-threatening with bishop g5 and trying to defend against the many threats that white has. But quite frankly, I don't really believe in this move. I think that white can probably just move his queen away and play something, and now move maybe knight takes b5 and try to get a good discovery. He'll play knight d6 check, for example, something like this. Knight d6. Knight d6 doesn't work now actually, but okay, well yeah, maybe knight takes b5 is wrong, but there's different moves like knight takes e6, knight takes, rook takes d8. And while white is probably, technically speaking, down material right now, I think that his position is very promising after something like queen b6, because black is going to have a very hard time untangling all of his pieces. So, however, this is an inaccurate move order, because in this position, black can play g takes f6, which was discovered quite a while ago. And after f takes e5, f takes e5, rook takes e5. Black's plan is not to castle on the king side, but to castle on the queen side. And soon black will just play queen c7, king b8. His king will be pretty safe. He's got pressure on the d file, and he has pressure on the d file, and he's got the bishop pair. And I think that his position will be excellent. For example, white puts in like king b1. I mean, what else? Queen c7, rook e1, and bishop f6, and I think that black is really going to have a good position here. So nowadays, the best way to play is bishop takes f6. We discovered, because now g takes f6 is much less effective because of this nice idea, queen e2. The point is very simple: play queen h5. Black castles queenside, queen h5 is very strong. If b4, queen takes f7 is possible. And I don't think that black will have anything special. I think white's attack will be much stronger than black's. So that was considered for a while to be the refutation, but quite frankly, I'm actually not convinced. I think that black will have plenty of chances to get decent play here. I think he can play, for example, after castles, queen h5. I think rook f8 even. It's passive, but it seems okay. One other thing to point out is that after b4, white cannot move the knight away because there's another threat that black has. He's opened up this line. God darn it, this thing is really frustrating me. He's opened up this line all the way to the queen here. And so, for example, here, knight takes b3 check, and white's losing. So that's a common thing that happens. I think any other way for white to play is non-effective. For example, if white castles kingside here, b5, b5, and bishop b3, bishop b7, and I don't think white's going to have anything special here, something like rook e1, and just bishop e7, and black seems totally fine. Black will castle at some point, maybe b4 first, and I don't think that there's any issues at all. So, other odds and ends, another move in this position is h6 that has been employed before, and actually it's because of the different move order. After bishop c4, e6, bishop b3, knight b d7, bishop g5, white's already played bishop b3. It's almost certainly going to transpose no matter what. It's just another move order in the bishop g5 line. h6 is another idea. The point is after bishop h4, bishop e7, white can't castle queenside because knight takes e4 is threatened. And he doesn't quite have time to play rook e1. I think here white can probably just take this off and castle a queenside, because at this point it's hard to see what black's going to do, because now he will have a much less good time castling kingside at someday, like for example something like this, f4. If he castles kingside, white will be able to play g4, and since black has created this hook on h6, white can start opening some lines, and I think white can be pretty optimistic about his chances in the future. And if after bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, castles b5, this kind of seems silly because we just figured out that the best variation for white when black doesn't play h6 will involve taking on f6 anyway, and it just seems like it will be a crucial waste of time. White will quickly play f4 and e5. So, and any other loose ends, I don't think there's much more to worry about after knight b7. One last thing we can look at is the possibility of white castling. The point of this move is simply to stop knight bd7, because if knight bd7 now, bishop takes e6 comes with dramatic effect. If it was played after bishop b3, this tempo is extremely crucial. Bishop takes e6, knight takes e6, and queen a5. This knight is now pinned, and black will be able to escape. For example, something like castles, I think, maybe just knight b6 maybe, hitting this knight. Knight e5 I'm sure is possible too. Really any move of this knight will attack this knight on e6 and pose immediate question to it. However, if white gets it a tempo faster, then after knight bd7, bishop takes e6, this is much more effective because here white has a nice reply, knight d5. Or I'm sorry, bishop d2 is probably the most effective way of doing it. Queen b6, bishop e3, again forcing queen a5 because he must keep in touch with the c7 square. And now knight d5. Takes and takes. And I think black is really hurting here because he doesn't have much time. If he plays knight f6, b4, and this queen will have to give up defense to the c7 square. And black's under a lot of pressure. I think white definitely has an advantage. So after castles, black can't do this anymore. But one good thing is the key variation in bishop b3 that white often likes involves playing queen f3, bishop g5, and castling queenside. For example, here it's something like this. Bishop g5, bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7, castles, knight bd7, and now, or sorry, no, knight bd7 is no good because of, if knight bd7, if bishop b7, white will play bishop takes e6 with dramatic effect. Black will have his king be in complete shambles after f takes, knight takes, queen d7, check, and knight f5. But knight bd7 is okay. Even though it relinquishes the protection of e6, black can play knight e5 here. And I think black is just winning because white will not be able to land a knight on e6, and black is going to have a decisive material advantage. But there is a line of e5, bishop b7, and now queen g3, with the idea of if d takes, or knight takes e5 for that matter, bishop takes e6. We can't take this because of the pin, and this is it's a very long variation in both knight takes e5 and d takes e5. I think white turns out to be good at the end of one of them, and the other one is a perpetual check. In any case, it's not something you want to get involved in, a theoretical discussion that will not let you have any winning chances if white knows what he's doing because of a perpetual. So I think that after white castles, it's totally fine to go for this variation. Something like bishop b3, b5. And queen f3, queen c7, queen g3, castles. This is a typical plan, but I really don't think there's much for white here after something like knight e8, rook a1, king h8, bishop g5, bishop d7. I don't think that white is going to have much of an advantage, if anything. So that's another way of doing things. And lastly, there is Bobby Fischer's old plan of playing f4 and f5, just trying to break this open, something like this. Castles, f5, e5, knight de2. And Fischer's plan here was very simple. He wants to trade off this knight for this bishop and then try to put something on d5. So for example, bishop b7, knight g3. To protect this pawn, and it's eyeing someday playing knight h5. Knight bd7, bishop g5. So now, if black plays a silly move like h6, white's going to be in great shape because of this, and then knight h5. And we can't take on e4 because there will be queen g4 at the end, and there's a nasty fork to be dealt with. For example, if g6, I think probably, well, in this case, queen takes g6 is going to be mate. But if black doesn't play h6, if black plays, let's say, a more sensible move like rook c8, takes, knight h5, knight takes e4, then g6 will still be somewhat possible here, but I don't think that black can really play this position after something like this and f5, f6. White's going to have a huge attack. Black's bishop will not be able to move because of this pawn behind, and white has full compensation for his two sacrificed pawns, and I think black will very likely just get checkmated. I've seen this happen most commonly, actually, after black plays queen c7 in this position. Bishop f6, knight f6, knight h5, and if black takes this pawn, then there's just immediate win of material because here if takes h5, f6, and the bishop is out of squares because bishop d8 will lose to queen takes a8. However, black does have a solution to this problem, which it took a long time for chess to come up with this, but rook c8, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, knight h5. Now I forget what the most accurate way of doing it is. I think black should take h5 here, and now the move is rook takes c3, sacrificing in exchange and playing bishop takes e4. So the point is here, black will next move play d5. This bishop on b3 will be total junk, and white's going to have very little to play with. I think black can be comfortable of a serious advantage here. So that wraps up video number 2 on the Najdorf, which covered the other side of bishop c4. The next video that I'm going to do will be covering bishop e3, which is another very common move. It's the most common one played at top levels. It's this one. And I will actually be covering both e6 and e5 for black here eventually, which I think are both very viable options